Estate Committee here at the board. And I think I only have one other committee member here. David, could you stand up, please? We put in a lot of hours and time trying to bring you some real quality presentations. And thank you. And today we are going to be discussing global events, as there are a lot of them. We are in some tumultuous times, presidential election, a lot of stuff going on in the world, some good, some bad, and how this impacts all of our businesses as real estate practitioners. And so we're going to introduce the panelists, and we'll start with Jim. Jim, you want to say a few words about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thanks, Allison. I'm happy to be here. Jim Lawson. I'm an attorney. I have offices in Beverly Hills and Carson. Had both of those offices for about 15 years. My areas of practice are immigration, mostly green cards for family relationships and business-related immigration, H-1B visas, L visas, and investor visas. My practice does not include asylum or deportation matters. My other areas of practice are estate planning and business transactions. I have a business background, CPA from Texas, MBA from the University of Texas at Austin, marketing degree from Penn State, and my law degree from the University of Texas at Austin. I had some experience in Houston working for an oil field service company in-house with operations in 40 different countries. So global business is of great interest to me.
Hello, my name is Richard Welling. I am managing partner at Richard Welling LLP. It's a CPA firm in Torrance. We specialize in tax services for the real estate and investment management industries and individuals that generally own a lot of both, of real estate and investments. I went to West High. Go Warriors. Yeah. And I also went to Cal State Long Beach, and after that I worked at Arthur Anderson for a number of years and opened our firm in 1988. And so I've had an office in Torrance since before 2000. Before that I was in West LA. Okay.
Hi, my name is Serene. I'm from CTBC Bank. We used to have the bank just by the Hawthorne, but now the corporate is moving to the Los Angeles. So I'm still know this area very well. So that's why when you guys always have the events, so they invited me to here to help the people, help the realtors to understand how we're gonna help the foreign national to buy the house in the United States. Also, I would like to introduce my boss here. It's Bill Owen. So if you guys have any question, he'll be willing to help too. All right, so basically we are helping the foreign national to purchase a house in the United States.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Michael Ruttle. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. I'm an immigration attorney. I have a practice in Torrance, right off Hawthorne and Lomita, in the same building as Juan Bueno, if any of you know him, right over there. I'm right above him. But we work in the same building. Juan's a great guy. I went to Cal State Long Beach, where I was actually studying to be a court interpreter, and then later moved and lived in Spain and Costa Rica for a while, where I was exposed to a lot of international corporations, and that kind of spurred my interest in immigration law. And so now my practice is devoted almost exclusively to immigration law. I do a lot of business applications for L1s, investors, employment-based, some family. I don't do removal defense like Jim said. That's a whole nother animal. So I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have, and thank you again.
And speaking about questions, let's try. I know it's difficult and challenging, as I've been doing this for some time, but to keep your questions to the end, if you can. You know, take a note, write them down. So my first question for you, the audience, is who likes statistics? Okay. All right. I can keep a lot of things in my head at once, but I'm going to read some of these off because they are interesting, and it pertains to a report based on a survey of realtors about existing home sales to resident and non-resident foreigners over the time period of April 2014 through March 2015. Approximately 209,000 homes are estimated to have been sold to foreign buyers over the period, approximately 4% of total existing home sales. The total foreign sales dollar volume is estimated at $104 billion. Who would like a piece of that pie? Approximately 8% of total existing home sales dollar volume. Foreign clients are an upscale group of buyers paying on average $500,000 for a house compared to the overall average, U.S. average of $256,000. Sales to foreigners are split between resident and non-resident purchasers. Let's see what else is interesting here. It's all very interesting, but there's a lot. 5 countries accounted for 51% of the purchases by foreigners. Who could guess what the top country is? Canada. Canada came first, then China, Mexico, India, and the UK. Although foreigners purchased property nationwide, 4 states accounted for 50% of international sales. What's the first state? Florida. Florida, then California, Texas, and Arizona. The percentage of realtor respondents who reported working with international clients in the 12 months ending March 2015 increased by 7% over the previous year. Previous client contacts and referrals were the most important source of leads for realtors, mentioned by 56% of realtors. An additional 20% mentioned websites and online listings. So, now let's get started. So to get a house, we need to have a loan. So let's start with Serene. Tell us some of the restrictions about bringing money into escrow or a U.S. bank account.
As we know, we have a lot of the international home buyer, and then the second one is from China. So most of the country, they don't have a restriction. They just wire whatever they want to the state. But for the China, there's a limit. 1 person per 50,000 per year. So that means 1 person the whole year, they can only wire money from China to United States for 50,000. So that means when you buy a $1 million house loan, a house, how many wires it's going to be? 20. Yeah, 20, right? Is that easy? No, yes, it's not easy. So that's why we need to have our buyer well prepared it. And some of the clients, they are smart. They are open the account in Hong Kong. So they open the account in Hong Kong, so they have a time, to get money ready, and they can wire the, a whole bunch of the money to China. To United States once. So, but that's only for China. But we also have other client from the countries. They have no problem at all. So that is something we need to kind of sensitive and to, that the client know. So the money, whoever we see in China, we don't call them as a money, it's a number. Because if your money don't wire to the state, it's not in the Hong Kong, it really cannot count it. It cannot count as a money. So that's why when you meet the clients, they are from China, you need to kind of help them step by step and, help them to get money ready.
So what about the loan? If they have a 50,000, as you said, so you can get the loan in the U.S.?
Yes, for our bank, we are helping the foreign national. The LTV is up to 60%. For example, if they are buying the house, it's $1 million house. So the maximum, how much they can get? 60%. But also remember, they are not only need to prepare for 400,000. They also need to prepare the reserve fund, and also they need to prepare the closing cost. So it's easier way to tell client, if you want to buy a house $1 million, you prepare 50% fund in the United States, and that'll be easy, right? So wherever they want to buy $2 million, they need $1 million. They buy the 500, 2,500, So something like that.
And let's try to keep our questions to the end. So jot down your questions, otherwise it'll be hard for my flow up here. But speaking about the changes in the world and the markets, and talking about the recent events with the Chinese stock market, attorneys, could you could you weigh in on how current events have shaped our business right now?
Well, I'm sure Jim and I can probably go back and forth on this, but I mean, as we see, you know, global events create movement in the world. In my field, when things change in people's home country, they want to leave. And so depending on the circumstances that a person has, and some people are of different means than others, but for purposes of this, you know, if people of means, if their money's really not safe in their home country, or if they want to get a better return on their investment, they're going to look for ways outside of their home country to get a better return. A lot of those, in this case, I personally have seen in my practice a recent uptick in a lot of e-visas, which are investor visas. It's for people who are coming here to make an investment of less than $500,000 to start a business, and then they can get certain immigration benefits. And when that happens, they need a place to live. And so, as I'm sure Jim can also attest to, that, you know, the bottom line is global events create movement.
Jim, have you seen an increase?
I can speak specifically about the country of France because I deal with a lot of French clients. And the historical pattern has been that every May there seems to be more phone calls or emails from people who are looking for visas to come to the United States. And that's been a pattern that I've seen over the years. But with recent events in France, there's been a much larger interest in folks trying to get established in the United States. And I see this as a few areas that's creating this push. One is the general economy there, and there are some real structural problems with the economy in France where people are not able to move up and advance themselves like they are in the United States. So younger entrepreneur types are much more interested in checking out the United States and coming over here and making their way, which they cannot do in France. The other is a more social aspect, and that has to do with the increased fear related to terrorism. And over the past several years, I've had several Jewish clients who no longer feel comfortable living in France. They really feel like it's a hostile environment. But more recently, with the Bataclan terrorist event and other general attacks, people feel more threatened, and so they're now looking to move to the United States where they know that there's more stability. And this is the reaction that was spoken about earlier. How can I save my money? How can I protect my children and their futures? Because it's usually not just the investor alone, but it's more their family members. And I can't think of an area of business other than the real estate professional where personal circumstances govern things. It's personal choices in what home they live in, what church they want to be near, what business they need to be near, what their personal drives are. And these are the basic reasons why people are picking up from their home country and coming to the United States.
And that leads me to Richard. Richard, could you talk about the tax benefits for a foreigner owning property or having a U.S. business here?
That's a big question. It's pretty fact intensive. So I guess first of all, let me back up a little bit. So in the tax code, there's what's called a U.S. person and what's called a foreigner. So a U.S. person is a U.S. citizen, somebody that has a green card, or somebody that has substantial presence in the U.S. So a foreign person or a non-resident alien is somebody that doesn't have any of those things. So some of your clients may be coming to the U.S. because they want to buy a home and they want to live here, and eventually they want to make their residence here. In that case, they're going to be taxed just like any other permanent resident or U.S. citizen, which is they'll be taxed on their worldwide income. And they'll get all the benefits and burdens associated with that. Now, some people are non-resident aliens and they want to stay non-resident aliens, and they want to have as little connection with the U.S. as possible. They don't want to be have their worldwide income subject to U.S. taxation, or, by the way, California mimics that, and so they could be subject to California tax on their worldwide income. So what they want to do is they may want to invest in U.S. real estate through something that'll minimize their U.S. footprint. So they might want to invest through a corporation, through a REIT. They may, so they can get the U.S. tax benefits flowing through on these investments, but they don't have to file a Form 1040 or a Form 1040 NR and expose themselves. So it depends on this foreign person what their plans are. Do they plan on just having a passive investment? And there's a difference between whether they're going to invest. If they're just going to invest in a home, there's not that much, not many tax issues. But if they're going to invest in a rental property, is it rise to the level of effectively connected trade or business? And if it's a simple rental property, like say a triple net lease, then they may just get the rental income and it may be subject to withholding. If it's a more involved rental property, it may be considered a trade or business that they have to file tax returns in the U.S. and California on. So they generally get the same, they can get the same tax benefits, depreciation. They can deduct, if they move here, they may be deducting home mortgage interest. They can, if somebody becomes a resident here and they treat their home as their main home, they can get the same $250,000 or $500,000 exclusion, which requires that it's their main home in 2 out of 5 years, which is difficult if somebody wants to stay a non-resident. So what one has to do is make sure when somebody's a foreign person thinking about investing in the U.S. is understand their motives, their plans, all the facts, and the best plan for them. And sometimes, and then you get into estate taxes, and so sometimes it's better to plan to be a U.S. person, and sometimes it's better to plan to stay a non-resident.
Because I know that there are quite a lot of foreigners who would like to have a second home here, but they're concerned about double taxation.
That's for me, right?
That's for you.
Okay, so double taxation, well, there's a couple ways people look at double taxation. The traditional way, from my point of view, is if you have a corporation, you can be taxed at the corporate level and then at the personal level. So, and that can affect foreign investors if they invest through a corporation. But I think what Allison is talking about is, say they're coming from Canada and they're coming to buy a home in the U.S. and they don't want to pay U.S. taxes and Canadian taxes. So with Canada and the U.S., they have pretty good treaties, and generally in the U.S. you can take a credit for your Canadian taxes if you file as a U.S. resident, or if you're a Canadian resident, you can take a credit for your U.S. taxes, but you can't take a credit for your California taxes. So there could be the fact that you start to develop some kind of domicile or nexus in California could create some additional tax. Now, if you just buy a home and you're just here a certain number of days, it's a second home, and you don't stay here too long, it shouldn't be a problem. So the issue is somebody, so imagine you go to another country and you have a second home in that country. You have a second home in France, and I'm not intimately familiar with the income tax system in France, but well, let's do it the other way. So somebody from France comes to the U.S. because the U.S. is unusual because they tax people on their worldwide income, and if somebody can inadvertently just be here too many days, and all of a sudden they're taxed on everything they earn in the entire world, and if they die while they're a resident of the U.S., they can be taxed on all their assets worldwide. So you do have to be careful. There is the potential for, if not double, at least additional taxation.
And that's why it's very important to define your client's goals, what they want, what they're striving to do. But Serene, tell me, how do foreigners establish credit here? And then in addition to that, can you talk about international credit reports?
Well, for national, they don't have a social security number. That means they have no credit here. But for our bank, we accept their own country's credit report. So we do not use the international credit report. The reason is it costs a lot. It takes a while. It looks like 2 to 3 weeks. So they will be delaying our processing time. But we are using their own credit report from their own country. For example, China, they have a great system. They just go online and they register in 24 hours. They just get their credit report. It's very quick, and Taiwan also has that, and so in the other country, like Canada also has a credit report. But for the country, some of them, like Malaysia, they don't have it. We also accept the credit reference letter from their credit card bank. So that makes the difference LTV. If you provide the credit report, then LTV is up to 60%. But if you can only provide the credit reference letter, that means we can only up to the 55%. But most of the clients, they are very easy to get a credit report from their country. As long as they can translate to it in English, we all take it.
And then for the two immigration attorneys here, what certain countries have a higher likelihood of obtaining these visas, and what types of jobs are less likely, or businesses, to be able to come here and acquire the appropriate visas?
Well, there's this thing that the Department of State releases every month. It's called a visa bulletin. And basically what that tells you is that for the certain visa categories, of which there are numerous, it kind of tells you where in line certain applications are. And what we see is that individuals from certain countries have a very large backlog. India, Mexico, China, the Philippines, depending on the visa, depending on the category, the backlogs we've seen can be sometimes 10 or 15 years if it's coming through family. So it's not that those individuals from those countries won't get approved, it's just that it'll take a very long time in a certain category. Now, as far as the types of jobs that tend to get approved more quickly than others, certainly when you're coming here as an immigrant and you want to work in the United States, one thing that the U.S. government wants to be very sure of is that you're not going to displace any U.S. American workers, right? So one thing that in certain situations a company has to do is show that they've tried to find an individual, an American, to fill this job, and there's just none available. Certain things like that are STEM categories: science, technology, engineering, math, professors, outstanding researchers, investors, things like that. A lot of jobs that don't really require much training beyond a high school level are jobs that are very difficult. It's very difficult to get an immigrant classified under one of those visa categories because a U.S. company can find an American worker to fill that job.
Jim, could you, if you have something to add, please do so. But after that, could you talk about student visas? Because I know that there are a lot of families that have thought about buying property in California to be residents so that their students, their student children, can go to school and avoid the heavy out-of-state fees associated with education.
I guess what I'd add to what Michael said is really for someone who's not familiar with the whole immigration process to just be aware that you really have to fit squarely in the box and meet whatever requirements there are that the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service puts out for that particular visa. I get a lot of calls from people who want to come over, but unless they squarely fit in the parameters of the particular visa, there are really no opportunities for them to come here. Michael talked a lot about permanent residence, and as we both alluded to earlier, there are other opportunities for people to come to the United States under visas such as specialty occupation visas, as intercompany transferees under an L visa, or as an investor under an E2 visa. And the E2 visa is a category that is limited to a particular treaty. So the United States has to have a treaty with the home country of the person trying to come over here to obtain the visa. With respect to students, families need to be very careful on entering the United States with children, and you don't want to enroll your child in school unless you have the proper visa. People can really run afoul of the law by trying to circumvent it. So at the front end, you need to do a lot of planning to make sure that your home country issues you the F1 visa prior to your entry so that your passport is properly validated. The the tricky part is that the student coming in will qualify to study, but they may not qualify for the great scholarships or resident status that is highly coveted by the folks here who can obtain those benefits. Michael, did you want to add anything to student visas?
Just that there are two types of visas. When people think student visas, they only think someone going to high school or college, but there's really two types. You can go to a college, a university, under the more traditional F visa, but then there's also an option for people who want to come here and do a vocational training, such as a trade school, and that would be an M visa. So it's not just, while you do have to fit squarely within the box of the particular visa category, there may be more than one box available.
Serene, can you talk about what you have been encountering as the most difficult challenges assisting foreign buyers with loan programs, and then go into a little bit of detail about a classic or typical loan?
Well, I think most of the difficulty is, I think, for them to transfer money here to get ready for to buy a house, and most of the clients, they don't understand this is their money, why they have to be seasoned in the United States for a certain time. So this is my money, why can I just use it and buy the house? But I think the regulation in the United States, for our bank, we are requested for 1 month's bank statement. That means when they're buying the house for $1 million, we're asking for about $500 in the bank. They need to stay in the bank at least a month. And we get a bank statement. So I think I've been working for the bank for about 5 years. I think I'm pretty comfortable and success with the clients who from the overseas. They mostly very cooperated to help, and then they want to buy the house here. So I think I'm pretty okay with them. I don't have a big challenge or something I cannot close the deal. So.
Only 30 days for season?
Well, we're talking about a month's bank statement. Yes.
And can you tell us one of your favorite success stories that maybe perhaps started with a very big challenge and then you were able to overcome that?
I think every day is a challenge. Because for us to buy a house here, we all know it's about 45 days, right? For the day one, they're asking for the loan. They start from there. And every day it's like the day, like 3 days, you have to do the appraisal. Every day is just like a challenge in that you have to keep remember all the clients, what they have to do. And we have to meet the closing date. So pretty much like, a lot of time we have sometimes we have the appraisal value. I don't know how many of you come out with that. Some of the house, they are maybe $5 million, and they can only appraise for 4.5, right? But some of the reason was because in that area, no one's selling the house. It's not because the house don't have that value. But we do have a great the appraisal department in our bank. We can kind of negotiate, we can get more information and help them to get it back. So I think we're pretty much with that. And I don't know, is my Bill for something to edit?
If I may, I'm Bill Owen, head of operations for mortgage banking for CTBC Bank. The biggest challenge, as she says, is really the wiring of the money. It's getting the money from the homeland here to the United States appropriately through FDIC channels. And FDIC isn't just wiring directly into escrow, it's really putting it into a bank. It doesn't matter if it's B of A, Wells Fargo, Union, or even coming directly to us. It's really okay. It's the fact of getting it gathered to then be used to meet the need for the real estate transaction, be it new construction, how it stretches out, or even already homes already built. And we're dealing all through Southern California as well as New York. So what we deal with every day is a challenge for other people, but we don't think that much about it. But we can tell when a borrower is already coming to us where we're going to end up closing at, because the wiring is the toughest thing. Thank you.
And the time difference when you're dealing with the clients and you're here and they're overseas, you might have some sleepless nights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think maybe you guys know this is a this thing we call WeChat. WeChat in China, everybody's using the WeChat. So it's just like our message here, but it's easier. You can just record your message. You can talk. We can call. We can see each other. I think it's very convenient. So you can talk to them, but normally my client knows that the time's different. So I'm kind of working 7 days a week, 24 hours. So wherever they leave the message, if I'm not sleeping, I'll just answer them. It's much, much easier than typing or, explain to them. They know if you're awake, you answer them. So I think it's very easy.
Mark, you had something to add?
Yeah, just one thing, just to add to that, sometimes the time change can work to your favor, especially if you have a client who's very helpful and eager and willing to close the deal. I recently had a case with a client who was very eager to move forward, and by the time I went to sleep, I had woken up and he had already communicated with his clients in Asia and his family and got all the documents by morning. So sometimes it can work to your favor.
Richard?
Allison, I was
Yes,
going
go
to
ahead.
just add something about WeChat. WeChat is so popular in China, and there's a version of it in Taiwan. It is so popular there that it's sometimes difficult to deal with Chinese clients because they think that we have WeChat addresses, and they want us to communicate in that same manner, and we're not there yet.
An app that I use with my client in Taiwan is called Line, L-I-N-E, and that's also, you can record your voice and send messages and photos and videos, and it uploads photos very, very quickly. So that's, for me, has been a very efficient tool. But these apps are always evolving, and they're very important because you will shine in front of your foreign buyers when you have the appropriate software and apps that help them conduct business with you. I guess it's WeChat and Line are the favorites. Richard,
Just be careful with those apps. Sometimes be careful with the kind of information that your client might be sending. If it's highly sensitive or confidential, you might want to err on the side of caution with that.
Yeah. Also, I think the good things about that is like you can add as like a group. You can have a realtor, you can have your clients, a loan officer. Everybody's in one page. So when they asking the question or you reply for all the information, everybody see it. So you don't have to back and forth explain to your clients.
Richard, do you have anything to add about difficult challenges, time changes, or something as boring, no offense, as inheritance tax? Because I know that that's a concern. And then if you could also touch on title and how you take care of title in these foreign transactions.
That's a lot of things.
That's okay. I know you can handle it. That's why you're here.
Okay, first thing, so do a lot of work in real estate, work with a lot of brokers and agents, and I get calls from real estate agents on Sunday afternoon about about maybe a Chinese national that wants to buy or sell a property. And normally they have to become a client, and I have to sit down with them and gather all the information. But for example, a challenge is there's a Chinese lady that owned a home in Newport Beach that was selling, and it had been her home for several years, and she was going to get the $250,000 exclusion, but the gain was much higher than the exclusion. She wanted to go back to China, and she was thinking, and she wanted to figure out how not to pay any tax on selling the home. And so she says, well, how about if I just abandon my green card, go back to China, sell the property in China, and then voila, I don't have to pay any tax. I said, well, there's this thing called FIRPTA, Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act, where you have to withhold. Now, it just got raised for sales after February 16th. The rate is 15% of the total sales price has to be withheld. And there's certain exclusions for residences under $1 million where it's 10% or under $300,000. But how many people have ever had to withhold U.S. taxes because there was a foreign seller? Never. Okay, a couple people have. Okay, so, but you are responsible for making sure that those taxes are withheld, and you can be personally liable if they're not withheld. So there's,
Repeat that.
okay.
One more time.
You and the escrow company and the buyer are personally responsible to withhold any FIRPTA taxes. Also, if you're if you're a property manager and you are distributing money to a foreign investor, you may be responsible for withholding distributions on the rental income to them. So, and a lot of times, the people from other countries, they don't appreciate, you know, they have different cultures, different rule of law, different things going on, and they want to try and figure out shortcuts, but you want to make sure that their shortcuts are not causing you a problem. So you need to make sure that you give the, you tell your clients to get a good advisor for what they're dealing with. And so her next idea was, okay, I'll move to China and I'll have the funds transfer, I'll have a Chinese buyer buy the home and we'll transfer the money in you know, the local Chinese currency, and that way I won't have to pay any U.S. tax. But anyway, I mean, she's been a permanent resident of the U.S. for several years. She has a green card, and just because you abandon your green card doesn't mean you're no longer responsible to pay taxes. So she really, you know, just to, you know, once you become a permanent resident, leaving the U.S. is like like a U.S. citizen renouncing their citizenship. If you have substantial U.S. or worldwide income or assets, it could be a big issue if you just decide I want to sell all my U.S. property and leave the country. So, I mean, she hasn't hired me as her CPA. I don't know if she wants to, because she's thinking, well, I have to pay you more money to pay more tax. So she might go find somebody, she might find somebody that will charge her less fees and give her the answer she wants. And that happens all the time, but you have to just be careful that it doesn't cost you. So how's that for a challenge?
I'm
Okay, what's next?
It was inheritance tax and title, transferring title,
Okay.
inheritance tax.
So inheritance tax and gift tax. So for U.S. persons, same definition for income tax. So somebody that's a U.S. citizen, permanent resident, or has substantial presence in the U.S. So they are taxed, the estate tax is, and gift tax is subject to their worldwide assets. But the good news is that they get this 5.45 million lifetime exclusion for themselves and their spouse if both are U.S. citizens or U.S. persons. And they also get the unlimited marital transfer. Now, if somebody's a non-resident alien, the estate tax exclusion is $60,000. So the value of any U.S. assets they have over $60,000 is subject to estate tax. And then there are some countries that have treaties, like Canada has a treaty with the U.S. on this sort of thing. So you have to really know your client's situation, what they're investing in, if they're going to be a resident or non-resident. So you could have substantial estate tax exposure if somebody comes to the United States, or somebody just, you know, they're a non-resident alien, they buy $1 million property in the United States, and then they die. They could have a big estate tax burden in the U.S., which they may or may not get a credit for in their home country. Now, which kind of transitions to transfer of title. So if you have, the gift tax is not, you know, in the U.S., if you're a U.S. person, you get the $14,000 annual exclusion per donor, per donee, and it's also subject to the $5.5 million lifetime exclusion. But if you're a non-resident, you get the $14,000 year per year exclusion, but you don't get any other exclusion. So if you make a gift of more than $14,000, you have to file a gift tax return and pay gift taxes. Now normally a U.S. husband and a U.S. wife can transfer property back and forth with no issue, but if it's between if there's a gift between a U.S. person and a non-resident alien that are husband and wife, there could be gift tax problems. So let's say somebody is a U.S. citizen and they want to transfer title to add their non-resident wife onto the title. So that could potentially create a gift. So you have to understand that. I guess the other thing with you know, there's normal issues with transferring title. You know, you could have a property tax reassessment, and there could be a disguised gift. I've seen you know, situations where, say, somebody from Taiwan, they sell a house in Newport Beach to their brother for $2.5 million, but it's really worth $5 million. and you know, so they're you know, they could be opening themselves up to exposure that may or may not bite them later.
Tax fraud?
Yeah.
Got to be blunt. Got to say it as it is.
Yes.
Jim and Mark, are there any new immigration laws coming through the pipeline or new ones that have been approved and ratified that we all as real estate practitioners should be aware of?
I would just say that I'm really reluctant when clients call about legislation that they hear about on the news or in magazines or in the newspaper, because there are so many bills that are floated as potential opportunities, and the reality is, unless the president has signed the law, we really don't have a new regime for that will be helpful to them. The one area that has recently been, I would say, ratified is the EB-5 investment regulation, and in December of 2015, it was up for vote, and they extended it without change. And the EB-5 is the green card opportunity for investors who are high net worth, who invest over $500,000 to $1 million under some very particular circumstances where they're actively engaged in the business and they can bring in 10 new employees to the business. And there was an enormous amount of lobbying done to keep that intact. And the big winners of that were New York City developers, and they have spent an enormous amount of money lobbying Congress to make sure that that remains intact. And Michael, you might want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the EB-5, when it was recently extended, was a victory for a lot of people who support that program. It has created thousands of jobs in the United States. Developers, there's also these things called regional centers, which one of the requirements, in addition to investing $500,000 to $1 million under the EB-5 program, is that you have to create jobs, 10 U.S. jobs full-time from that money. And so the changes have been, you know, well, can you create that? You have to create those jobs directly or indirectly. And the beauty of what these regional centers do is they kind of pool these investors' money under this EB-5 program and will fund projects, real estate development projects in various areas, and kind of doing that indirectly creates jobs. And so that's one way that people can qualify under the EB-5 program. Additionally, and while Jim was right that, you know, him and I, I'm sure, both get a lot of calls about people, have there been any changes in the laws? No, there haven't, as no major changes. While it's difficult for laws to change, there's a lot of stuff in the news about President Obama's executive actions, right, which is not arguably a change to the law, but what the administration is trying to say is that their argument is that it's a change to the policies of implementing the laws. And so one thing I would say is pay attention to that, because there's more to those executive actions than what's portrayed in the news. It's not just intended to help people who are here without papers or undocumented, but there are other parts of that overall program that when we'll see what happens at the Supreme Court, but there are policies in there that will affect the H-1B program, the student visa program, options for startup entrepreneurs, options for intercompany transferees, and then another thing called what's called portability, which means when somebody who's here on an employment visa and they want to change employers, they either leave voluntarily or they're fired or the company is dissolved, what have you. So with those executive actions that are up at the Supreme Court this term, it might be interesting to see what happens at the end of the summer on that. So that's what I would say, pay attention to that.
All right. And what should we talk about, or obviously we do not guide our clients, we send them to you, the professionals, about trusts and how that can benefit them as foreign buyers. Who would like to weigh in on that? Go ahead, Jim. Richard?
There's certain, for estate planning, sometimes a foreign trust can be beneficial. So we talked about the estate taxes. So if a person invests in real property as an individual non-resident alien, they could be estate taxes. But if they have a irrevocable foreign trust that meets certain requirements, that trust can invest in the real property and not be subject to estate tax. And what some people do is they have an LLC, the trust forms the LLC, and the LLC buys the property in order to limit the liability. So it has to be the right kind of trust. It has to be properly written. If it doesn't have the right requirements, it will fall out, because there's a lot of different types of trusts. You know, like a lot of us have living trusts. Those are revocable, and those are disregarded for federal income tax purposes and state tax purposes generally. They just help you with probate. So same kind of issues if you have a foreign trust. And there was something else I was thinking about that, but I'll come back to it if you want to add something.
All right, we're going to take questions in a minute, but first I'd like each of the panelists to please give us your best advice for all of us as real estate practitioners in a global marketplace.
One thing that I've found that really helps in my practice is, learning another language really helps if you speak another language, because a lot of times when foreign investors come here, they don't have a lot of contacts within the U.S. And sometimes they have family here, yes, but sometimes when they're talking to you, you might be one of just a few contacts that they have in this country, and so they are relying on you for a lot of things. And so with that, if you handle their case really well, with closed business will come more business. And so when other people from their home country say, I need insert type of professional, I need this person, who are they going to say, well, I know this person, he or she handled my case and handled my deal very well. And so you'll start to see that you might start getting a lot of clients from one part of the world. And if you can speak the language, you don't even necessarily have to speak the language, but if you're familiar with local custom and local culture, that is something that, can go a long way. It's the soft things. And one thing that I actually have used is there's this book, it's called Worldwise, by a woman named Lainey Denslow, and I don't know how to spell her first name, but her last name is Denslow, D-E-N-S-L-O-W. And I met her at a conference, and she gave me this book, and it's just kind of, talks about culture and the way people are accustomed to doing business in various parts of the world. So if you find yourself coming into a lot of contact with individuals from certain parts of the country, by showing that you care and that you're willing to learn a little bit about them, that really goes a long way.
And then just to add to that, as we have talked about many times before in these global panels that we put together for you, Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands is a fantastic book, because there are so many subtleties when you're dealing with different cultures that you need to be aware of that may seem strange, but they're not strange to those people and those individuals. So Kiss, Bow, and Shake Hands and the book that Mark recommended, absolutely buy them. If you want to be a global player, you need to bone up on different cultures and their social mores. So Serene, tell us what you would advise us.
I would say is service and the trust. Will your client trust you? So wherever you help them, they understand, they will follow your direction to do it. So they won't have a lot of creative idea. I think at this point, I have a lot of clients right now, and the realtors, they'll fund the referral. Every time they call me, say, oh, I'm referral from this person, this person. They have a great experience to do the loan with you. So I really appreciate that I have an opportunity to help the people to purchase a house in the United States, because it's such a big investment for them in the state. For them, it's another country. And they want to be here, but they need your help. So I think the trust is the most important things that between me and my clients.
Well, I think the most important thing is encourage your clients to have the right team, and that also by extension that means that you have the right team, and you have different advisors in different areas, maybe CPAs, attorneys, appraisers, bankers, and maybe advisors in other jurisdictions as well. And the other thing, like I said, is protect yourself. Make sure you don't open yourself up for liability, because the the people from other countries may to understand your professional requirements, and so don't cut corners. Because sometimes there may be, I know like maybe Chinese real estate brokers that are dealing with Chinese clients, and it's just specific thought. I'm not singling out Chinese. We can say they're Mongolians, or we can say that they're French, because those French, but I think sometimes they may try and pressure their broker to do things that are kind of cutting corners or beyond what is ethically or proper in your profession. So you just be careful with that. And the other thing is let's see, there was. Well, the other thing I'm thinking is you want to get the listing, and a lot of times you want to get the listing, or you want to get somebody to buy the property. And a lot of times the reason you're not getting it is because you're not solving the client's problem. So you can think of creative ways to solve the client's problem. So like an example might be, and this doesn't have anything to do with international taxes, but you may have a 70-year-old person that's sitting on a piece of real estate that they bought 50 years ago, that if they sell it, they're going to have a huge gain, and they say, well, I'm just going to keep it till I die. And so you can't get the listing, they can't sell it, because them and their children want them to die and give them the property and get a step up in basis, and then they'll sell the property. So, but there may be some solutions to get the listing where you can solve the tax problem. So the same kind of thing where somebody might be resistant to buy or sell because they're afraid to buy U.S. real estate because they're concerned about double taxation, they're concerned about estate taxes. But if you say, well, I can introduce you to somebody that can maybe help you solve the problem, then you can get the deal.
And let me just add my little 2 cents worth on this. Talking about your team, there are escrow officers who are more experienced with dealing with these foreign transactions, and they recognize wire numbers that have been flagged, and they're just more accustomed to doing this. So, if you have a complicated foreign transaction, choose your team very carefully. Choose your escrow officer very carefully, and don't let anybody pressure you on who you need to use. You want to use someone who's going to protect all parties, your clients and you.
I would just sort of echo some of the things that Richard was talking about, and I see that there's a real temptation on the part of the real estate professional to go after the business, and it's like, I can't let this opportunity pass me by, when the real wise choice is to maybe get some counsel at the front end, call on the team that Allison and Richard are referring to, and get the problem worked out. It may end up that the deal is not doable, and so that doesn't sit very well with someone who wants to make some money. But in the long run, you may save yourself a lot of headaches and a lot of trouble and maybe some jail time. I just wanted to mention that the Worldwise book referred to that Lainey Denslow did is incredible. I happen to know Lainey, and she would be so thrilled to know that it was being quoted here. So I would also like to recommend that book for anyone who's looking for getting a better grasp of cultural sensitivity.
Well, I think we need to get Lainey to come and speak. I guess I'll make that my next mission with the committee.
Can I just add one thing to that? Going off with what Jim said, it is very important to have a very good team in place. And so one thing with that, if you have a good network of connections, then and you're ready to take on business, that's very important at the front end. But if you already have your team in place, one additional thing that I like to recommend is, it had been alluded to, I have this deal that came to me and I don't want it to pass me by. A lot of times in whatever industry, we wait for business to come to us. One thing that might be unorthodox but that has worked for me is, instead of waiting for the business to come to you, go to the business. Next time you take a vacation abroad, take an afternoon, reach out to a professional in that area who's in your industry beforehand and say, hey, I'm going to be in Madrid on this day, and we're in the same field. I'm trying to expand my network. Let's meet for coffee. And from there, that person, if they need if they have a client that needs a contact in California, then all of a sudden you're at the top of their list. So something else that might be helpful.
And you may be able to make that trip tax deductible.
That was going to be my next point. And then also, if it seems a little odd or too good to be true, do get counsel. I've told this story before on different panels. A listing agent had a property. He was approached directly by a Chinese buyer who insisted on working with him, and he sought counsel, and it was a money laundering scheme. So if, you know, it's exciting, it's tempting, oh, I want to have both sides, but keep your eyes open and be aware, especially when we're dealing with people across the pond and we don't know who they are and we haven't met them. So just really, really be aware. And then also everybody that you meet is an opportunity. So when you're traveling abroad, definitely speak to these people, take their contacts. You never know how it's going to come back to you. All right, Dina, if you could please take a mic, we're going to open this up to questions. So Dina is also on the committee, and she's going to run around and start off with the questions. Take it away, Dina.
Hi. Excuse me. I have two questions, really. What's the situation in Argentina getting the money out of there to be able to purchase property here in America? And number two, the non-residential alien. My understanding was they were going to remove that word alien from that. Is that true? Have you heard that?
Who would like to answer that? Argentina and aliens. Okay. Serene, do you want to talk about the getting money out of Argentina?
I have not contacted any client from
We haven't had one out of Argentina.
All right. So that will require further communication. I do have a client who is Argentinian, so I'll give you my card. We can make some inquiries.
Regarding the second question? You're good?
Second question was aliens. Yes, aliens.
Well, I mean, I guess it's the term in the code right now. I mean, I know there are proposals to sanitize the code and make it more politically correct, you know, like especially after recent Supreme Court cases where they want to take out husband, wife, and they want to take out alien, but they'll have to replace it with another word. But I guess it's helpful because you can have a non-resident. You can have a non-resident that's a U.S. national or U.S. citizen, or that has a green card. So that's the term. I guess a non-resident alien or a foreign person, we do call it foreign person, is anybody that's not a U.S. citizen, not a permanent resident, or doesn't meet the substantial test in the U.S.
But the word is still there, and it doesn't seem like it's going away anytime soon.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from most of this is before you even start a deal, you should be talking to the tax guy and the lawyer with your client, maybe. Is that correct? And
I think it's very good sound advice unless you're dealing with a buyer who is very savvy and who is aware, and you might want to try to establish whether or not they are aware of the different tax consequences, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah, because we're not going to know them.
No, absolutely not.
Yes.
Our role is not to do that, is to provide them enough information they can make their own informed decision and to consult with the professionals.
Okay, and so for the banker, does it always take an attorney to close or not usually at all? No. Okay.
I have a question on the withholding for the foreign, when the sellers. So I heard if you get a what I call tax ID, then you can avoid to get a withholding. Is that true?
No. Yeah, anybody can get a tax ID number, but that doesn't determine whether it's taxable or not.
For Jim, I don't know if I understood correctly, but you had talked about an e-visa for a person to take advantage of, but only if there is a treaty between the United States and the home country. So how would somebody, I mean, do we just assume that you know about that or any immigration knows about that?
The visa that I mentioned was the E2 visa, and that is, as I had mentioned, you really have to fit squarely in the box, and that's one opportunity for a foreign person to come over to the United States for periods of 3 to 5 years based on an investment. And the investment is typically in the range of $150,000, and the person would actively engage in the business. For anyone coming over for business purposes, you really have to look at the unique circumstances of what they're trying to accomplish and what visa opportunities we have for them. So a lot of times, individuals who are coming over to acquire property are doing it really in an ancillary way. They are really coming over to start their business, but they know they're going to have to live here. So they're already figuring out those immigration aspects, and then the realtor comes along and helps them acquire a property to live in.
To follow up on Jim's point, that particular visa, the e-visa, is called a treaty visa, so treaty investor, which means there has to be a treaty in place. And to your point, I think you asked how we find out whether a treaty is available. That information is publicly available through the Department of State. Whether and what they'll just tell you is whether there is a treaty in place for that country, for that type of visa, and when it was in effect, put in effect.
I have a question for Serene, too. Do you sleep, and is it easy to learn Chinese?
Well, actually, English is my second language. So I'm always speaking Chinese. I have no problem at all. But be honest, be a loan officer, I can only sleep like 5 to 6 hours a day.
Anyway.
It's really a challenge and really stressful work. So every day I tell myself, I want to quit tomorrow.
Your boss is sitting right there.
I know, I can't. Maybe. It's just very, very challenging that every day, see like nonstop testing and say, where's my loan doc? When they register, they just tell me, where's my loan doc? When I can close? When am I going to get the keys? Well, I say, well, you have to be patient and follow my direction, then you'll get your house. But if you don't, you ask too much, you'll be held down. Yeah.
We have a question over here. But I got the mic. The question is for Serene. Serene, does the U.S. impose anything for the wire? Like you say, there's some foreign countries have the rules on how much money you can transfer. Does the U.S. has any, special, requirements for how much can you transfer, and how do you have to document the money where they come from? And tell me about the U.S. requirements.
The money outbound.
Money coming in, U.S. say, oh, it's not okay, we don't know where they came. Oh, I don't know. You tell me.
Bill, you want to answer the question?
Again, it's FDIC. It's all going to be handled through FDIC rules. So in other words, if it's an institution such as the Big Bank of China, it's coming from British Columbia, it is coming from the Sudan, wherever it may be coming from, it has to be a proper treaty with the United States to bring that money in. But it has to come from an institution. It must be institution to then be used in the United States. Otherwise, it becomes dark money, money laundering. It can be used for anything. So people just show up with a suitcase of cash, turn them away. And now I think, and I was going to ask the question, is it or is it not so that even on a for sale by owner, somebody going out to buy a home shows up with a cash in their, in a basket or in a box, whatever it may be, when they go to close, that also has to be traced. Is that so now through the escrow organizations?
I recommend yes. Yes.
Cash.
Hello. I have a question because you'd say something a little bit scary about the liability of the agent involved when it's about tax. And I learned that when you have a client, we should say nothing about tax and say if they ask question about it, you say you should have a CPA or someone that is specialized. So, and I know nothing about tax, so how can I be liable? I don't know if you say that. That's why you don't say that. Yeah, so that's why I prefer not to say anything. But if you say we will be responsible, it's kind of scary.
Well, the responsibility I was talking about is the withholding. So if the seller is a foreign person, they could be subject to withholding. And from my understanding, when you close escrow, don't you verify whether the person is a U.S. person or a foreign person? You get some kind of escrow does that.
The buyer is ultimately responsible. They go after the
Okay.
buyer.
Well,
The buyer does not check
okay.
this. I mean, they don't really go after real estate agents.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, but in the code it says the buyer, effectively the transfer agent, and the real estate agent. So even if you say no that the seller is a foreign person, and even if they sign saying that they're a U.S. person, and you know that they're not, theoretically, if the IRS could come after you, I mean, I don't know if it's likely. I mean, I know it's very common for payroll taxes, and I've seen it happen before. But if the IRS wants their money and it's substantial, from what I read, it's limited to your compensation from the transaction, so they can't get any more than your commission. But it's on the books. I mean, there's a lot of things on the books, and the likelihood that's actually going to happen to you. But that's something that I think that normally that the escrow company does is verify that whether somebody's a U.S. person or a foreign person, and just have to make sure that that's done properly.
Here we go, over here.
Okay, I have a question pertaining to countries in the EU. Is there a treaty for the visa, and what is the minimum that people would have to invest in the United States from Europe, if they're in the EU, to come to the United States for a green card?
Well, green cards are different than
Work
visa
visa?
investors. Yeah,
Okay, visa investors,
visa
okay.
investors. And my advice to clients is always, there's no black line letter of law as to how much a substantial investment is. But my advice to clients is that the amount be about $150,000. I've never had any rejections on files if it's that amount of money. I believe that most of the European Union countries are in treaty with the United States. I know that Brazil is not, but
The EU.
Right, but I'm giving you an example of one type of country that is not, but is very popular here for investment. My dealings have been with even Switzerland, which is not in the EU. I believe most of them are beneficiaries of the treaty. And you might have a comment on that.
Well, yeah, just that the treaty in place wouldn't be with the EU as a whole. It would be country by country. And the difference between the E2 investor and the EB5 investor is that they're both investor visas. It's just with the EB5, you get a permanent visa. You get a green card in return. Whereas with the E2, you get a temporary green card. And so the E2 is a smaller investment, and you don't get to stay here as long. But with the E2 visa, you're investing in a business. And as long as the business is continuing to go and grow as a business should, then you can continue to renew that E2 visa. There have been cases of people having E2 visas for 15, 20 years, as long as the business is going. And Jim is absolutely right that with the E2 visa, the temporary visa, there's no limit in the law that says how much you have to invest a minimum amount. What it does say is that it has to be enough to a substantial investment in a business to make the business more than what's called marginal. It can't be a marginal enterprise, which means it's just enough to create a living for you and your family. It has to be a return on the investment.
And the other visa you said was, which gets you the green cards, called the EB?
The EB5, and what that refers to is EB means employment-based, and 5 is the fifth category. There's 5 categories for permanent green cards, and that one is for $500,000 or more, up to $1 million, and create 10 jobs, and then you can get a green card.
Thank you.
This one, the 500 to million investment. So he can buy the house, apartment, or the business.
No, the investing in a house that's just going to spending $500,000 or spending $1 million on a home is not an investment for EB5 purposes, because you're not creating 10 jobs. Simply saying I'm going to hire a contractor, a landscaper, a pool guy, that's not going to cut it for EB5 purposes.
What about the apartment building or the fourplex, like for $500,000, let's say he buy the house, and for either for the $1 million he buy some fourplex.
There have been cases that I've seen, and maybe Jim can talk more about this, where somebody investing in an apartment building and creating that as the business. Real estate development can be granted the EB-5. But as Jim said, it has to fit squarely within the box. And so if it really depends on the case, and every case is different, and if those particular circumstances fit squarely within the box, then absolutely.
I think it's really hard for people who want to come to the United States and they know that they have enough money to buy a house to think that that alone will allow them to get a visa to enter the country and stay here. And that's really not the case. I did have one client from Switzerland who was looking for an E2 investor visa. He happened to have family members who owned 90 units in Las Vegas. And so he was able to create a management company where he was managing that particular real estate. And through that management company, we were able to get him an investor visa that helped him be here. But the simple buying of a residence or a 10-plex is really not substantial enough in the way of management generally.
Yes. Yes, in either case. So if you're doing the EB-5, which is the permanent green card, if what happens is the investor files the initial applications, and then if those applications are approved, they get what's called a conditional green card, which is normally granted for, I believe, 2 years, and then after 2 years, then there's an additional filing to show that yes, the business is still up and running, and that you have created the 10 jobs, and that you meet, and then you fit squarely within the box. And if you don't, then yes. And it's the same thing with the E2 visa. A little process is slightly different in the sense that you would show at the time that you extend, because remember with the E2, it's not a permanent, it's a temporary visa, but it can be renewed essentially indefinitely, but you have to prove every time you renew that the business is still going.
So what happens after 2 years?
What do you mean?
So you have the conditional, then you do the 2-year review application,
and then,
another one 2 years after?
no, if the conditions are removed that first time, then the person becomes a lawful permanent resident, in which case they get the green card, and the green card itself is valid for 10 years.
10 years, okay.
I have a question. Talking about, Richard, you mentioned about for LLC, then they can invest, bring more money to U.S. to buy the property, right? So can award the state tax. I have a customer is buying the commercial property here, and each time they create the LLC, and so it seems I have no problem to wire the money, buy the property. What kind of tax they're going to have, you know? They have a LLC set up in U.S.
Is it a single-member LLC or is it a multiple-member LLC? Do you know?
Like 2 members or 3 members, sometimes 3 members, sometimes 2 members.
Okay, so a single-member LLC is disregarded for federal income tax purposes. A multi-member LLC, by default, is treated as a partnership. So that LLC, if it's a California LLC, it's considered a U.S. entity, and it'll get a U.S. ID number, and it, you know, the partnership itself will file a U.S. tax return on the U.S. property if it's a rental property, and they'll issue K-1s to the investors. Now, when the partnership makes distributions, if a partnership makes distributions to a foreign investor, they may be subject to withholding. So they may have to withhold either on distributions of operating income or distributions of gain. They may have to withhold tax on those distributions.
Okay, so in this case, better refer them to see CPA, professional people, take care of their tax, right?
Yeah, yes.
But I have another question. Talking about, say, like Chinese or Canadian, they only can wire 50,000 each person. I think it's Chinese, 50,000 each person per, right? Some people, they say, okay, I want to buy property. I have to get 10 friends to wire the 50,000 to get enough down payment. Is that legal?
Well, you know what? Even though you have a 10 people wired to one account, the bank will stop you.
I
You
see.
can't. You
Then
cannot get in.
what is the second option? So they have to go to Hong Kong. They have to transfer their money to Hong Kong bank and wire the money from the bank in Hong Kong.
I think the most of our clients are very smart. They know how to do it. So, you know, for me, I don't direct them how to do it, but they know.
But
Yeah,
so
they
as
know
a-
the way. They know the way how
okay,
to get
if
the money
my
here.
Chinese client get a loan from you, they have 40,000. They have 50,000 fund available. So they can get 60% loan from your bank. And then in the end, before closing escrow, as long as they have money wire from outside the China.
The money cannot wire direct to escrows. No,
No,
you can't.
the-
It have
the
to be
money-
in the United States.
The balance of the down payment, they have to be wired
In
from
the state.
From state.
From from the bank here to the escrow. They cannot direct to the escrow. No.
Oh,
Yeah.
go
you
to the bank. Yeah. The money is from the Hong Kong bank, wired directly to this escrow. Is that okay?
No, you cannot. U.S. bank.
Oh, go to the U.S. bank. Okay, sorry. Go to U.S. bank, then wire to here. You don't care where the money come from, right?
As long as we have a 1 month bank statement and it shows they have a 500,000 the beginning balance, ending balance still is 500,000. There's no large deposit in between.
Okay.
I think for the document that we can use it.
Okay.
I don't ask.
Okay. That's it.
We're still going to take more questions. We have time, but for those who have to leave, please grab something to eat on your way out. Just so you know. Don't want you to feel left out. But more questions are coming.
I just had a quick question about the board. Does the South Bay board here have interpreters and escrow companies, like where we can research real quick, like online on your website?
I'm not sure if we have it in our drop-down tab, because we're not supposed to endorse anybody, but we can offer...
You can offer...
Right.
Okay, and that includes...
And you can always reach out to us individually and talk to us about it as well.
So when you were saying that, you know escrow companies that have done this already, then you have a list.
Absolutely.
Okay, got it.
Well, one thing I want to point it out is we are not only doing for foreign national. If they are the green card, they just had the green card from EB5. They just immigrate here, and they haven't had a chance to, well, not having a chance. They're just new. They're here. They don't have a 2 years credit report, and they can still get a loan from us if they never reported the tax. They can still have a chance to do it. The first year, actually, if the second year now they're done, they cannot do it. For us, 30 years amortization and 3 years ARM loan. 3 years ARM. 30 years? Is that?
Well, they are 30 years.
Was 30 years loan. And
No, I mean, like, what's the interest I think?
4.875 for 3 years ARM.
So that's
This
not
ARM
the
loan.
bank. The same interest the other banks are charging. Can you make sure you have the mic if you're going to ask a question? This lady had a question.
Okay, just a quick question regarding the withholding. Because I understand that the sell point, if the seller is foreign, so they got a withholding for 20% of their their proceed, right?
Well, it's 15%. It's 10 or 15% for federal, and there may be California withholding too.
Right. Then what are you going to do with that? Then you will find tax return afterwards? Because they actually, let's say they buy a house, they don't have gain, they don't owe any tax on that.
So the let's say a non-resident alien sells U.S. property, 15% taxes withheld. They get a withholding certificate. Now they can represent that this is all the tax they owe on the gain, and just not file anything, or they can say, well, if I actually calculate the tax on a Form 1040 NR, my tax is going to be less than the amount withheld, and I can get a refund. So they can get, just like a California withholding, when somebody sells real estate and they withhold California taxes, you can take that as a credit on your 540. Well, you can, if they withhold U.S. taxes, you can take that as a credit on your federal return and get a benefit for that.
Okay, so even the foreign, so you can file 1040 NR to get that back if you don't have you don't owe any tax.
Correct.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Hold on.
Wait for the mic. Hold on, we'll get you the mic so everybody can hear.
I have experience for that, and I sold foreign people's property. You could, during the escrow, before escrow, there's a form you can ask the federal and say you calculate everything. These people doesn't make any gain. There's a waive. There's a special waive form. You can waive that. You don't have to wait for next year to get the money back.
Yeah, that's true. Just like, you know, you're probably more familiar with the California withholding form. On the California withholding form, there's a list of exceptions where people can reduce or avoid the withholding. So it's similar with the U.S. withholding. There's a list of exceptions, ways you can eliminate it or mitigate it.
We have a very important affiliate who has just walked in the door. It is Andy.